Hello, everyone, and good afternoon to you. My name is Naishad Gadani, and I'm coming to you from Melbourne. And today is the 233rd episode of Career Care Package. We have seen all the COVID variants, starting from the first one to Delta, and now we are also in the Omicron. I don't know how long either this show is going to last long, or they are going to continue to invent find out new and new variant. But it's good to be back, chatting with you again on sort of a cloudy Friday afternoon. And where KB is, it seems pretty sunny where she is. But today we are going to talk about a topic that always brings a lot of curiosity and a lot of discussion about informational interviews. So that's what we are going to chat about today. So before we take a deep dive into the topic, let's welcome Caroline Brown.
Thanks, and I promise I'm not super spreading. I am actually in Eden, on the border of New South Wales and Victoria. Beautiful historic town on the beach or on the bay, famous for whaling, but now famous for beautiful beaches and fishing and all sorts of things. So I decided to take a little break. And every time I've organised a holiday in the last couple of years, we've had a lockdown. So I'm sorry, everyone, if something happens this weekend. But no, it's absolutely fantastic to be here. We're talking about informational interviews because we talk about them in the cards against insanity as a great tool for changing your career or finding a new job. But I think a lot of people don't really understand the concept because it's a bit, there is a way to get to A to B with these things, but there's a different way, a specific way to do it. And I think people don't understand the connection between the networking aspect and what that could actually turn into. So yeah, very, very excited to talk about that today.
Excellent. We'll also be, showing you a slide that we prepared just to aid our discussion. Not that the slides are the most critical aspect of it, but
I spent hours
we
on
have
them,
just
Nash. Don't insult my slides.
so we'll just use that slides as a discussion tool. But if you got a story, if you got a question about networking this way, please feel free to drop in your comments. We'll take up your questions or comments as well.
Yeah.
If you got a successful story of how you've been able to get an interview, informational interview, and through that you may be a job lead, we would love to know those. Or if you've got concerns about how do I really kickstart that, well, hold on to your questions, because that's what we are going to take a deep dive into that. So KB, let's start with what we call informational interviews. What are they?
Well, it's a term that was coined by Dick Bowles with that famous book, What Color is Your Parachute? And I was first attracted to that years and years ago when I was struggling to make my first move into a new career. And I found this book about how to get a job. I thought it was like how to get a job without actually having to sit through an interview. And I thought, aha, ka-ching, or how to get a job without a resume, basically. So he's the person that coined the term, but really an informational interview isn't an interview. It's a meeting that you organise for the purpose of getting some specific advice from somebody. Now, often these turn into something else. Like they can turn into somebody offering to pass on your resume. They can turn into real interviews. They can turn into somebody offering to keep an eye out for you. But really, if you think about the purpose of it is to find an advocate, but somebody that can actually give you some good advice. So an informational interview is an interview that you set up for the purpose of getting some advice about the job market, or changing into a sector, or changing into a career, or finding out what you need in this local market. That's my definition of an informational interview. But I'm sure you've got a different take on that as well, Nash.
No, no, I think it is similar to what you've told about. But if you look at the analogy of, if we are going to, let's say, buy a home, we go out and check with friends or families who live in a particular suburb and say, how the schools are, how the shopping centers, how the other facilities are there, although a lot of information is available online, but you still want to hear from somebody who lives in that suburb to get a real sense of what it is to live in that suburb. So
Mm,
I also treat that, give this example of that. You want to climb, you're a good climber, but you want to climb Mount Kosciuszko and you've not done that. You've done Dandenong 1,000 steps and you think you'll probably be able to climb Mount Kosciuszko. So what you need to do is to go and talk to somebody who's climbed it before,
mm,
not that, not to ask somebody to accompany you when you're climbing it, but say, look, I'm curious to know how did you prepare yourself for this this climb or this hike, and what sort of preparation did you do, or what sort of things that you need to buy, what should I be aware of when I'm
mm,
climbing? So all those things that you are doing in order to prepare yourself for that move. Now in that context, if they say, look, I've got this hiking group going in there, do you want to join them? Well, that's what we are looking for, and these are the
yeah,
chances that what we want to talk about in this context. So that's how I see informational interviews. It's not
yeah.
something that we haven't done before, but in the context of career, or
Mm,
specifically when looking at finding a job or a career change,
mm.
we haven't done this kind of tasks before. Yeah.
Yeah. And the point is, I often with my clients, because I do a lot of informational interviewing with the Straight to Shortlist Challenge. So I'm going to go through in a minute the actual process that you can use this interview and how to segue the discussion to something at the end, something that you might get at the end. But a lot of people say, well, I know that already, right? I know how to climb Mount Kosciuszko. I've climbed all the mountains around. In fact, I've even climbed Mount Kosciuszko a few times myself. So the point is, not, I mean, you will get amazing information at the very least, but the point is you're actually wanting to build a connection with people. So you're wanting to have somebody know, like, and trust you so that they can think of you. So even though you might know the information that you're about to ask, or you've had 3 or 4 other meetings with people about how to climb Mount Kosciuszko, the point is that you're building a connection with each and every one of those people. And that's the underlying real point of this, and that's where the gold lies. I mean, you might get information, say, for example, if you're about Mount Kosciuszko, about this particular shoelaces to tie your boot, but you might pick up some gold with that. But the bigger point is that you're building a relationship with the person that you're asking those questions of.
Absolutely. Okay. So let's talk about the effectiveness of it. Why informational interviews are effective way of, finding a job, or, getting a lead, KB.
I think they're really empowering to start off with. So, for example, I mean, everyone says, okay, 80% of jobs aren't advertised, but I've never seen the research that says that. But what the big data says that if you find a way to be referred or recommended to a job, you've got 10 times more likelihood of being successful, because employers, you're shortcutting the recruitment process. You're coming from a trusted source. So informational interviews are a great way to generate those kind of referrals. So they can be really, really effective in you doing that. But the other thing too is I think that they're a great skill to have in general, but they really can boost your confidence when you're going out into the market. Because when you think about it, and I've got an example of helping a client this last week, job advertisements are really often very misleading. So, and you don't get a lot of feedback on, why you might not have been successful. So you can be doing the same thing over and over again. That's not the correct thing. So if you're going to speak to somebody about what it's like to do that particular job, or maybe you know that the job's being advertised in their firm and you're going to get more advice around the firm, you're getting the real meat around what it is that you'll be actually applying for, or in general, for example, what that job actually looks like. So then you can make a much more informed decision, put in a better application, and again, have built an advocate as well. So that's the real power, that they are really confidence affirming. And like what we've discovered doing the straight to shortlist challenge is that people are scared to reach out to people,
Mm,
particularly if
yeah.
they don't know them or don't know them very well. But nobody that's nasty says yes to these
Mm,
things.
mm,
There's never been a dickhead. I always
mm,
say that dickheads don't say yes in this, right? There's
mm,
never been a dickhead that says yes. It's
mm,
always a nice person that is wants to be helpful, that will say yes to a meeting.
mm,
So you just got to keep that in mind. If you're discouraged about how it's going to work out, at the very least, you're going to have a good conversation with a nice person.
mm. Yeah. Yeah, they are, I think informational interview acts like your intelligence, market intelligence too.
Yeah.
There are people who work in there. They can give you sometimes honest opinion. You may feel that you are fit for this role and you can do this, but you may find out that what what research that you've done by looking at internet or looking at all the other data, that is not what the employers are looking for. That has changed, and
Mm,
that's equally important, is to say, am I fit in the job or not, or am I daydreaming,
mm,
at the same time. So they act like your ears on the ground. Now,
mm,
not necessarily that all the people are ready to do that for you
mm,
at the same time. You know they also need to trust you, they also need to believe in you, they also need
mm,
to feel that you are genuine, there is a genuine intent out there, rather than hey, give me this job. That's why
mm,
I'm trying to do it, because I think a lot of people have been burned as
mm,
well badly by this, is that they use this pretense of, "Oh, I just need some, have a quick chat or have a coffee meeting,"
mm,
and then they've been put under pressure to either help them out, or either
mm,
listening to their a story of desperation,
mm,
and then people back out from
mm,
it too. Because so I think as you said, is that there are people out there who will be happy to help,
mm,
provided that the approach is also pretty sound and pretty
mm.
professional as well.
Yeah, so we usually make it very clear up front, or even in the tone of the first communication when you're setting these up, that it is about information, and generally you're telling people what specific questions you might want to ask, knowing that they are likely to be able to answer them. So if they think that they're not able to answer them, they won't reply, or they'll say no, which is okay. So yeah, and they do know. Like, it's a weird sort of thing, because you are sincere about looking for a job or a career change, and people do know that that's what you're there for. But they don't want to feel that you're immediately going to hit them up and put them on the spot, because you will
Yeah,
kill the opportunity
yeah,
as well first up. So
yeah,
I've just put a little slide together around, like, when you might use informational interviews. So I'll just put it up for people just to see when they're really useful. If your skills are in demand, right, and you're getting contacted by headhunters or recruiters off LinkedIn, you probably don't need to use this technique as much. It's often when you want to take a U-turn, or you're new to a market, or you want to step up, or you want to go back to something. It's often when you're not wanting to do something that you're doing immediately currently, that these are really useful. But they're also very useful for when you're new to Australia, into a local market. So when you're setting these interviews up, these might be the reasons that you would do an informational interview. So you want to change your career, you want to enter a new market, you want to change sectors, you want to step into a new role or achieve a promotion, or maybe you want to return to a previous role. So they're generally, reasons that you would want to seek out an informational interview with someone.
yeah, yeah.
Oops. Oh no, I didn't. Sorry, I thought I'd completely deleted my that beautifully produced slide off the stream.
No, it's there. It's there. So I think that's right. I think career change is an interesting one. As part of my role, I work with a lot of master's student in law, and
Mm,
they do masters to in order to pivot to a new career or new direction.
mm,
They want to use that, and my recommendation to them is to have couple of options for you. Is
mm,
that okay? This is an area that I want to work on. I want to work in environmental law, to I want to work in an IP law, and then you look at both the options and
mm,
find people who work in there to get a sense of, how did they pivot, how
mm,
did they make that change, and what employers are really looking for. Those are the things that you use, this informational interview for.
mm,
That's what I think it is. Let's move on to the next one, KB, because one of the thing is that how to find, I really like that idea of what to write to them, right? Because a lot of people connect with other people on LinkedIn straight away, right? And I
yeah,
think most of the, if you got a decent LinkedIn profile, people would not mind to connect with you, right?
mm,
Obviously we recommend that you customize your LinkedIn invitation to certain degree so that at least you've got more acceptance,
mm,
and at least people expect that this is the kind of communication that will be from you. But
mm,
at the same time, wait for a couple of days, wait for 24 hours, not just bombard them straight away, right? That's equally important in my view. We get connected with someone and straight away next 1 minute we get a message, and I said, okay.
yeah.
So that's equally, take your time to determine few things. So what are some of the things that people can do once they connect with somebody?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a funny thing on LinkedIn because sometimes we have sent messages straight away as soon as somebody's connected and they have responded. I think it really did. Well, I mean, it sounds obvious. It depends on the person, but it does depend on what your next message is, right? Because with your messaging, if you're doing it on LinkedIn, you don't want them to do any work, right? The only work that you want them to do is to understand um, what if to understand if they can help you. Like, so you're looking like a credible professional on LinkedIn. You've got a photo, you've got your sections filled out. There's a bit about your section, so you're looking like a credible human being. So generally, when I get people to reach out, including a few things in the email, you have to you've chosen them specifically, right? So you're not spamming everybody. So for somebody like you, I might reach out to you and say, hey, Naish, I'm new to the Australian market. Like you, I'm from India. And I can see you've had a few interesting career changes from sales engineering to going into careers. Would it be possible for me to meet with you for 15 minutes or have a chat with you over Zoom? I'd really love to find out some information about how you changed your career from know that I've read your profile with that. So you want to tell people really what genuinely interests you about that person. You
Mm,
then want to give them the information, just one or two lines about the information that you want from them. So would you mind if I asked you a few questions about the change that you made coming from or going from engineering into career coaching? So so you've got to pick what it is that you want from them, that kind of information. And then you've got to just say and make the ask in this email because it might be the one chance that you get. So um, would it be possible to meet with you for 10 minutes and then a little bit of buttering up, and I think you gave me this line and it's worked really beautifully with people. Information, insight coming from somebody like you would be immensely valuable to me, and I'd appreciate any time that you have. And so that's the approach. And generally, it varies, but we get sort of between 20 to 60% of people say yes. So it is a bit of a numbers game as well. And I always say to people with this, like I go back to the worst thing that will happen is people will ignore you, right? You haven't made a goose of yourself. If somebody
yep.
ignores a well-crafted, sincere email, that is about them. It's not about you. So um, and also with that, don't be afraid to follow up a few times.
Mm,
I think the level of follow up depends on people's level of comfort in doing that
yep.
process. But if you're
Yep.
really uncomfortable about bothering people, we've had people that have come back after two follow ups, right?
Yep.
So it's just about getting over that little bit of discomfort that you might have in that process. So that's the setup. So then you might go and meet somebody, but you can guarantee that when you're sitting in front of them on Zoom or whatever, that they're still wondering about the meeting, right?
Mm,
So they're still like, oh, Carolyn seemed really nice, but I don't know really why. I'm not quite sure what she wants from
mm,
me.
mm.
So we in that meeting, it's your job to facilitate the meeting,
Yeah.
and set the structure up. You may not do all the talking, but you've got to facilitate it with the way that you'd open it up. And so I've got a structure for that I actually give people, which is the slide that I was playing around with before. So
Mm.
I'll show it. But do you have any comments on, like, is there something you wanted to jump in and say,
No,
Nish?
I think this, keep it simple. The structure
Mm,
is right. Don't overcomplicate things. As you rightly pointed out, is that by you not approaching other people, you anyway are missing out on an opportunity. You anyway
mm,
will still continue to do what you're doing, which is applying jobs online, and you're not getting anywhere, right?
mm,
So I think it's a good way to to start kick off the networking. And remember, another thing is, people, if people ignore you doesn't mean that they are not interested, but sometimes, as you rightly pointed out, sometimes it takes one or two pokes to
mm,
really do that. I think, how many times people have to remind us to, when they have sent us something, how many times did they have to remind us, right?
mm,
Probably multiple times. Hey, Naisha, I've sent you this, I'm still waiting for a response. Oh god, I forgot, right? So I think it's natural. It's not that people are not interested in you, but they're working full time, they're busy,
mm,
right? So you also have to consider that if you're only going to focus on five people, and then say, I've done these five, emails or messages, right? And then it's leave. No, you got to do more,
mm.
so that you get percentage wise responses. That if you're
Yeah.
going to, let's say, if your interest is to get three meetings um, every week, for example, right? Then you'll have to probably send, I don't know, 7 to 8 messages in order to get
Mm,
2 3 meetings.
mm,
That's what we are talking about here, right? So you can actually go backwards and work it out. And
mm,
then what it will also kind of do is that it will also give you a more wider net
mm,
to play around with as well. One of the things that I
yeah.
do, KB, is that I ask people to use multiple Boolean searches to find people, not just
Yeah.
one Boolean search.
Yeah.
Because you
Absolutely.
may want to, let's say, you may want to look at, a job as, I don't know, environmental engineer, right?
Mm,
Now, environmental engineer is easy to find, but sometimes people may not have put exactly the same. So you might have to go with core skills that
mm,
is pertinent to that role, and then you look at it. So I think you may have to use probably few other Boolean searches
mm.
on LinkedIn to really expand your search results and then reaching out to them.
Yeah, and just a side note on that, I mean, if you've got a free account with LinkedIn, they do limit you after a while, and they don't tell you what the limit is and when they're going to reset you back to normal. So I tend to use Google, Boolean searches in Google, searching LinkedIn to get around that. So that's probably a whole other show.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so there is yeah, so you do have to cast the net wider, than maybe you're immediately comfortable with. But I wanted to share with people the way actually, because I spoke about, facilitating. It's your job to facilitate that meeting, even though you're not going to be doing all of the talking. So general rule of this is, it seems a bit counterintuitive, but you want to be about 5% of you and 95% of that other
Mm,
person,
mm,
because that's around building a relationship and being a good listener. So here's how I get people to set these up, and I'll just make sure I've got the right slide coming up now. So the person, you're in that Zoom meeting, you're in that coffee meeting. Um, you've exchanged a few pleasantries, so you've broken the ice a little bit on the way to that meeting. But here's how I would set it up. First of all, you want to thank them for meeting with you. Then you want to say something about a really brief introduction about why you're there. One line, two lines max, because if you go into your elevator pitch, you're going to bore them and you don't know what's relevant for them to know. So thank them for meeting you, explain why you're there, explain what you know about them, and then explain briefly what you're wanting to find out about them. So it's along the lines of what I've got on this slide, and this is something I did. I'm putting a YouTube video up about this, but this is something that I did with a change manager who was new to Australia, and she was meeting with another change manager who had worked in a change manager in a few major companies in Australia. So, thank you very much for meeting with me. I'm a change manager. I'm new to the Australian market, and I'm looking for my first career opportunity here. I saw from your LinkedIn profile that you've worked across different sectors as a change manager. So I thought you'd be really, well positioned to give me some good advice, because I'm wanting to find out more about the skills that this market really values in change management. I've got a few questions prepared. Would you mind if I ran through them? And that's just the setup for the meeting. And literally it takes what? I don't know, a minute, half a
Yep.
minute. But it really sets the framework up, because then they'll go, oh, sure, fire away, basically. So, but you've facilitated that whole structure of what the meeting is going to look like. And then, there's questions that you want to ask from them, but it does come down to some questions that will get them talking, like a few open questions and easy questions for them to answer, because you're asking them about them and their experience, and then getting down to sort of the more specific questions as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah,
Have you
makes
used
sense.
that kind of?
Yeah, similar. But I use a line said that relax. I'm not going to ask you for a job. I
Yeah.
use that line because I think though that this makes it very clear.
Mm,
Sometimes that affirmation from me that
yeah.
I'm not going to ask you for a job, so you
Yeah.
can pretty well relax now.
Yeah.
I think then people are less guarded about
Yeah.
this. And then, but also at the same time, then you seriously don't ask them for a job too, okay?
Yeah.
Because otherwise that would be pretty disastrous.
Yeah.
The meeting will go down south pretty soon.
Yeah.
So that's what I would do. And you can be light about yourself. As you
Mm,
rightly pointed out, KB, is that you're connected with them. If they want to know more about it, they can click on your LinkedIn profile and find you. This is not
yeah.
a future employer that you need to kind of go full blown on what you have done, where you have done, the results that you produce. Not this point in time, it's not at
Mm,
all required. And don't even attach your resume too, because that's
yeah.
another mistake that you would make, right? Don't
Yeah.
attach your resume because it's going to fall flat.
You also, I mean, it may be appropriate that you give them your resume, but you might want to, some of this meeting, you might get some information that helps you tailor the resume. Um, and yeah, I like what you said about, saying, don't worry, I'm not going to ask you for a job. I sometimes position that, so I get the same message across, but position it slightly differently, which is, I'm researching something that I want to do in the future. Um, this is the start of my research for this new change. So it's not saying, I'm ready to make that change type thing. But yeah, and I've used that line of yours in emails as well with clients around, don't worry, I'm not going to hit you up for a job or whatever as well, because it does make it lighthearted. So then, like, I've got a list of some questions that you might want to ask. So I'll go across to that slide because I think that's next. Yeah. So if you're there to really understand what, say, a change manager does in this market, you could start off with, what's a typical day for you? What do you enjoy about what you do? What do you find the most challenging? What skills does this market value? What skills do you see as in demand in the future? What are attributes that firms like yours value? That's a really good sort of pointed kind of question. Any advice that you could give me about getting into this market? Have you heard of anybody hiring? So you're not saying, are you hiring? Because I'd love to work for you, but
Mm,
have you heard of anyone? Again, you're not, but that's still planting the seed in their mind. So, I mean, these are the questions that the first sort of couple are really about getting them to talk about them and their experience. And, they might just, you might just hit go on those questions and off they go, and that's the end of your 15 minutes or so. But generally, I mean, if you've got a good meeting, that's generally what happens. You don't need to do too many. You may not get to ask all of those sorts of questions. So, but after that, what generally comes up is, so what are you looking to do? What are you looking
mm,
for? And that's where you bring in your bit of a pitch. So for this one, it might be, well, I've been a change manager back in Brazil, and I've worked for some large enterprises, and I really enjoyed that work. So I think that's where I'm going to head with this. And if they're interested, they probably might start to ask you some questions about your experience, or that they might say, oh, well, look, I occasionally hear of people hiring, so I might, if I do, I'll keep in touch with your resume, or I think we've got something coming up, or you should go and speak to so and so. But at the end of your questions, that's where you can bring your pitch in, because you
mm,
know what bits to talk about that are relevant to them. So you might have done more than work in an enterprise. You might have worked, for an NGO, or a not-for-profit, or whatever. But you're not going to talk about all of that because it's not relevant to them. Because
mm.
what you found out from your questions is where their kind of remit sits in
Yeah,
terms of their experience.
yeah, yeah. And one of the question that you can always, not always, but you can ask them is that, what would you do if you were in my situation?
Yeah, that's a great question.
You know, it's, but make sure that that you got sufficient rapport with them, and you're not
Yeah,
asking them a question,
yeah,
like a police officer asking them a question, right? So you got to be very
mm,
gentle about this. That,
mm,
just out of curiosity, what would you do if you were in my situation, new to the country, or changing jobs? What are some of the things that you would have thought about, right?
mm,
I'm just, and always be, make sure that the questions are questions, and they are not asked as a probing questions. They are not
yeah,
probing. You're not kind of there to take notes. Obviously you're welcome to take notes, but you're not a police officer asking a question to a possible suspect,
mm,
right? So you got to be very gentle, and you don't need to follow the question format as such. Let it be a conversation. Let your intent drive the conversation,
mm,
about this. You can have pointers, that you can have the notes in this is what I want to know from this person, and always ask them that, look, I'm going to make some notes for this meeting, to make sure that I can reflect on it and make changes based on that. So do you mind if I just make some notes for myself? I think that also demonstrates the diligence, that
yeah,
demonstrates that you are really serious about this stuff. You're not just there to have a coffee in Melbourne CBD or Sydney CBD, right?
yeah.
So that's what I would say.
Yeah, and I love what you said about let your intent drive the questions, because your intent really is curiosity. It's curiosity about whatever question you've got in the back of your mind to answer. So in this person's, it's curiosity about what's this local market. So and then they're not prescriptive, these questions. I give people questions because you it
Yeah.
is nerve wracking to go and meet with strangers, and so I always feel like if I've got some questions here, even if I don't ask them, I've got something that is a bit of a
Mm,
security blanket in a way.
yeah.
But
Absolutely.
you want to follow the conversation. So if they say something interesting, you know, ask about that as well. So
Mm,
and yeah, tell them what you're thinking of doing. So I'm thinking of applying for a job at da 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 da. Do you think that's a good place for me to start? If you're looking to change a career, you could say I was thinking of stepping in at this role. Do you think that's a good place for me to segue,
mm,
to start? So but I wouldn't, those sorts of things are kind of like the yes or no questions. So you
mm.
want to gather the information
More
with
than
more
that. Yeah.
open questions to start off with. So
Yep.
yeah. And then there's a few things that I think that, like the do's and don'ts around this as well,
Mm.
Naisha, I think people
Yeah,
should know.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, One is, and I think I've got a slide on it, so I should memorize the order. Yes. One is you want to look the part, right?
Mm,
Because we make very quick judgments, like split-second judgments about people when we meet them, and then we have a confirmation bias. So we're trying to, like, if I think that you're a nice person, I'm looking for ways to affirm that
mm,
impression that I have. If I think that you're um, a, a, not a nice person, then even if you say lots of things that are really nice and
mm,
encouraging, it's going against my impression. So I'm struggling mentally to
mm,
decide. So you don't
mm,
want people, you don't want people to have that struggle when you go to
mm,
these
mm,
meetings. So go looking like you're ready for work in that job.
mm,
So I downloaded this picture of I don't know, one of those stock sites, but I just thought it illustrated it really nicely. It's like which person here, they're the same person, is the IT and which person's the lawyer. It's
mm,
so yeah, you want to look the part. And one of my clients quite a few years ago wanted to work in New York, and she said she did a whole lot of networking when she got over there
mm,
because she didn't have a job. But what she did was she made sure that she was dressed like she was ready for work
mm,
every single day for every single meeting. And she got an opportunity with IBM, um, having dinner with a friend who used to work at IBM, saying, and her friend said, "My old boss is coming." So she's looking like she works there already. And that was her first lead into that
mm,
company. So you want to look like the profession, and every
mm.
profession has a code of,
Yeah,
what a typical person looks like.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Fully agree. And secondly, if you are inviting them for a coffee, I think
You
it's
pay.
very recommended that you pay for the coffee.
Yeah.
That's another thing to
And to make it
consider.
easy for
Yeah,
them, right? So you're going to them, they're not coming to you. You're going into their space where it's super, super easy for them to, even on Zoom, super easy for them
yeah.
to actually meet up.
Absolutely, absolutely. And don't, as you can start conversation about which is something which is common interest, something that you have seen, on their LinkedIn posts, something that you like. You can bring some of the clues that you've gathered, some of the intelligence that you've gathered with you. I would always, Google the person if I can
Mm.
find something interesting about them. I
I
will
saw in
always bring that up.
1987 you were arrested for shoplifting. How did that go?
Yeah, something you never know what you can find out, and you might have to cancel the
But you've
meeting
got
and
a
say,
good
"Oh
lawyer.
God." Yeah, that's absolute right. And another thing in do's is that trust your instinct about this. If you feel that the conversation is getting, you're experiencing resistance from them. You know what? You don't have to have the conversation. You can end
Yeah,
that nicely. You don't, if they see that you've asked for 20 minutes and you've already 25 minutes,
yeah.
and they are continuously getting kind of
Twitchy.
edgy about it,
Yeah,
say, look, sorry, how about we take this conversation offline, and
yeah,
and do that. So I think you have to follow your instinct and your professionalism here. There's nothing more that we could add
yeah.
to the what you can do and what you can't. Yeah,
Yeah, and a lot of the time, just on that point, Nash, people go, "Oh, I've only got 10 minutes," right? But they're 10 minutes because they don't know what you're going to ask them,
yeah,
and quite often those 10 minutes turn into an hour, and then you know that you've got somebody
yeah,
that's you've
yeah,
started a good connection with
yeah,
somebody. So
yeah. And secondly, if I can also suggest, this is something that it's based on how do you go about this. But you can always say, look, is it okay if I keep in touch with you?
yeah,
Is it okay if I do a quick follow up with you, what you told me, and if I finish them, and if is it okay if I send you an email?
mm,
I think what it generally demonstrates is that you are taking this thing seriously. It is you're giving the attention that it desires. If someone says to you, what, send, have let me have a quick read your resume, or I've checked your LinkedIn profile, and I think if you make these changes, if you make your designation, which is your which is kind of not clear, if you make those changes, or I think this is what you can find out, action them.
yeah,
Very, very important. Actioning them is very important, and letting them know that you actioned it too, because
yeah,
I think that just demonstrates professionalism. And if you get a job, by the way, let them know that, look,
yeah.
I've,
Absolutely. I think that's
because
really
that's what it
important.
demonstrates. Yeah.
Yeah. Sundar has just made a very funny remark. Both the lawyers, one was work from home. Homeschooling, I reckon. So
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
and you
these
know
are the
what?
things,
One
and
of the guy on the left might be a lawyer in IT, like or
you never
creating a
know.
new brand for himself.
No,
I'm not sure.
lawyer who works in startups. I don't know. And
Yeah.
secondly, I think one of the later that we use in our cards against insanity, what we call broadcast later, which is a
Mm,
good tool for you to send an update to people you meet on the way on your
mm.
journey and let them know what's happening with you too. So that's what we would recommend.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. I think what you've said, that follow up is really critical because, this person's been so generous with their time a lot of the time. And I know, I get a lot of people that ask advice from me, but I rarely get how they implemented it. I might get thank you, but I remember the people that come back to me and say, "Oh, actually, I made that change and I got a job from that," you know? So, yeah, absolutely tell people how you've implemented their advice because the other thing you want to do is you want to keep the relationship going. So,
Absolutely.
you're wanting to, have a reason to keep back in touch with that person as well. So, and the other thing about these meetings is that time and time again, you might have had a meeting and 3 months later something might come from it, and it's the same with actually sending out those messages in the first instance.
Yep.
Often you might not hear back from somebody, but it's registered.
Mm.
And I've heard quite a few times where somebody's come back and said, actually,
Yep.
I got your email and I'm reaching out now because we've got something here at this firm.
Yep.
So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. These are some of the things that people can do. I don't know whether I can add anything else to this, KB. Have you got?
Hmm. No, I think that's about it. I mean, my advice is to do as much of this as you can, because it's a great skill to have. You want to, and it does. It is. It isn't. I think a lot of people will just sit and apply for jobs because it's a direct thing. Like they think there's a job here, it's direct. I'm going to get from A to B. But this is about planting a whole lot of seeds.
Mm.
So it doesn't. One seed that you think is amazing may not actually
Mm.
flower. There is
Yeah.
one other thing I wanted to share, and it was when Serena and I spoke about it a few weeks ago about the
Mm.
types of people that you'll meet as part of this
Mm.
process,
Mm.
and based off what Steve Dalton has as his 2 hour
Mm.
job search.
Yeah.
And that's you've got the what is it, the curmudgeon. So
Mm.
that's the dickhead. And generally, curmudgeons are really good. If you come across a curmudgeon, it's actually fantastic as part of this process because they're the type of people that um, they just they're angry with the world in general,
Mm.
or they're very cynical. If there's nothing in it for them, they won't do it. So
Yep.
if you come across a curmudgeon, you can recognize them because you will never hear from them. So
Mm.
they're easy to deal with. And then the second type of person is the obligate. So it's the
Mm.
nice person, like you and I have
Yeah.
been sometimes. Like we're a bit hard to get a hold of. We want to be nice. Somebody's been good to us. We're doing it out of some sort of sense of
Mm. Mm.
obligation. And you may or may not get something from the
Mm.
meeting.
Mm.
Um, but the third type of person is the advocate, so the
Mm.
ally, so the person that and he calls them boosters. So the person
Mm.
that genuinely wants to help,
Mm.
genuinely you've made a connection with, and the
Mm.
person that will do what they say they're going to do. So that you'd recognize a booster from the
Yeah.
quality of the interaction, but how quickly they come back to you and how quickly they follow up.
Mm.
And sort of the people in between, the obligates, are the people that sort of dilly dally around having a meeting and da 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 da
Yeah.
da. They may turn into something else, but
Yeah.
generally you want to keep going through this process of contacting people until you get the
Mm.
booster or the advocate, basically.
Absolutely. All right, that brings us to the end of 233rd episode. We have got two more episodes before we take a Christmas break. We don't know who's coming next, not next Friday, but I think either me, Caroline, along with some amazing guests as well. So, have a great Friday, everyone. Have a great weekend. Stay safe, stay well, get vaccinated if you're still waiting for that, and we will see you on Friday at same time. We'll do this again.
Fantastic. And if you're watching this and you haven't bought these, you know what to do. They're great. Great Christmas gift, no, Nish?
It is absolutely. Go ahead and
All
buy
right.
that.
And
Okay.
yeah, a few other quick things. Buy the Cards Against Insanity. Follow the hashtag Career Care Package. Follow hashtag Cards Against Insanity. Go over to our YouTube channel and subscribe. A lot of the tips I'm giving you are from my Straight to Shortlist challenge, which I've got little videos of that on our YouTube channel as well. And yeah, we'll see you next week.
Bye for now, everyone.